Thank you so much. What an honor it is to be here. So distinguished guests, visitors, commanders, chiefs, thanks for being here as my teammates. You know, there's always 10% that don't get the word about the uniforms. What happened, guys? You can dress them up though, can't you? Yeah, they look nice. But anyway, thanks so much to the entire team for having me. You know, when you're asked to talk about your career and a little bit of your background, it makes you a little bit uncomfortable. You know, I talk to kids every once in a while that will say, how do you become a general in the United States Air Force? And then I talk to my classmates from college and they kind of put a different inflection on it. They go, how do you become a star general in the United States Air Force? You know, so listen, it came by being mentored along the way. That's the basic part of it. And not worrying about the next job, but worrying about the current job. So I'll just give you a little bit of background. I was born in Mobile, Alabama, a long time ago. You know, there's some 1962 model airplanes out here in these hangars. I'm a 1962 model, you know. My wings are a little tired, my gear are hurting a little bit, you know, so. But 1962, Mobile, Alabama. My dad was in the Air Force, spent 33 years in the Air Force. So I've grown up in communities just like this one. My whole career, my whole life, 58 years of doing this. Moving around, being parts of communities just like this one. And what you remind me of as members of the Chamber of Commerce and specifically the Military Affairs Committee are my reservists that I serve with. So my reservists, 70,100 reservists out there, most of which are working full-time, 40-plus hour work weeks already, but then they're donning the uniform. You, sitting in this crowd, have significantly busy lives, but you're taking the time out of your day, your evening, your week, your month, your year, to support the teammates right out here at Robbins, and I can't thank you enough for that. So it's my pleasure really to be here. So left Mobile, I moved to Georgia. I lived in Moody for a little while, lived off base there at Moody, but being a part of the community, went to Spangdahlem, Germany, was there for a little while. As a kid, moved back to Mobile when my dad went to Thule, Greenland for a year, and experienced that. It was a fantastic experience for him. Wasn't so much for us. Moving back and living in a small apartment, you know, trying to get by, but it's fantastic. And then back to here, as a matter of fact, to Robbins, where I spent my first and second grade. So the building I'm currently in, I can look out the window of my building and see Lake Shore Drive, right? And that's I can point where my house was when I was in first and second grade. You can't see anything out there now. It's amazing, the construction, because they're putting phase 2 into the building now. The trees are gone. They have mowed it over. I want to be a heavy equipment driver when I retire, because I'm looking out my window so distracted watching them shred these trees and get it ready for phase 2 and phase 3. So left here and then went to Scott Air Force Base, on and off, moving around the country, really getting to experience life, which has been incredible. You know, my wife and I, my wife was growing up in West Springfield, Massachusetts, same town. You can go back there today and the same guys are sitting on the same bar stool, friends of hers from high school, you know, and I'm envious of that, but also I'm grateful for the experience I've gotten to live all over the country. So when I was going through high school at Eglin Air Force Base in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, Niceville, Florida, I decided to go to Auburn. I wanted to be a veterinarian, you know, and so I applied for Auburn. My dad had gone to Auburn, and I thought, this is going to be awesome. So I get accepted, barely. Get accepted, and then I get there and I realize there's a lot of math involved in being a veterinarian. So I quickly changed degrees, and I wasn't doing so well. My dad said you majored in beer and girls. You know, I was an ROTC at the time. I wasn't competing well for a pilot slot. I wasn't doing that great, so I made the phone call to my dad. Dad, I'm going to leave Auburn. I'm not competing that well, and he said, well, good luck. And that's part of that mentoring I was talking about a little bit earlier. And I said, can you define good luck? He said, yeah, good luck with everything. Good luck with where you're going to live, how are you going to eat, who's going to pay for that car that you have, that insurance that you have. And so life got tough pretty quick. I'm talking cut it right to the knees very quickly. Rightly so. I didn't appreciate it at the time. I do appreciate it now, that's for sure. So I moved to Mobile, Alabama. I got a job. I worked nights as a night auditor in a hotel. while I was going to school full time at night, picking my grades up, trying to turn my life around because somebody forced me to do it. I was not being enabled anymore. That was a tough life's lessons, but it was one I really, really think that got me going in the right direction. So a friend of mine that I'd gone to high school with in Illinois, at one of the high schools I went to, encouraged me to come back because my dad had been reassigned to Scott Air Force Base, Illinois. And I said, Dad, if I could just live in the house, I'll pay for everything, I'll get a job, but I want to go to Southern Illinois. They've got an ROTC program. And so I went there, and I had to write a letter and get somebody to write a letter for me because I entered Southern Illinois University on probation. And I graduated, and I got a pilot slot. And so because somebody saw something, somebody allowed me a second chance, somebody mentored me, somebody coached me into doing the right thing. So I went off to pilot training at Laughlin Air Force Base in South Texas. My first assignment was B-52s at Fairchild Air Force Base in Washington State, where a lot of the planes I've flown are up on sticks now, in parks like the one we have here. So making me feel really old, but had 2 years there on active duty, and then I left there to go be an instructor pilot in the T-37, which is the initial jet trainer that we had back in those days. It's also up on a stick. And I did that, and then at the time, you see cycles in the workforce and the economy, right? And so we had too many pilots back in those days in 1991. And so they allowed us to get off active duty early. And a bunch of my friends were getting out and moving to this part of the country and getting hired by Delta. And I said, that's what I want to do. Because I had met my wife, now to be wife. She was working at Disney with my brother. And I thought, that's a draw. That is a draw. So I moved out here. I got a job flying H-860 combat search and rescue helicopters down at Homestead Air Force Base before the big Hurricane Andrew. So I've experienced a hurricane, which was another community relations issue, where we had teammates, their houses were devastated, their lives were turned upside down, but the community rallied around in order to recover. I remember flying the helicopters out the day prior to the hurricane. This was August of 1992. And we had flown 7 helicopters up to and parked them in the old Piper hangar, which is near Lakeland, Florida. And the next day, we got the call to be able to go back down because we were fully equipped rescue helicopters. We go back down and we start doing combat search and rescue. But there were no visual cues that you're used to, seeing street signs and familiar cues. And so it was very tough duty. We ended up picking up in the next 3 weeks about 127 folks that needed help. They needed to go to the hospital. I remember flying up to Jackson Memorial Hospital. I was an unqualified co-pilot on night vision goggles. It was scary. It's scary to fly with me now. It was really scary then. I remember landing on Jackson Memorial. In the H-60, the way the tail wheel is, it's very far behind at the very back of the helicopter. So it's not configured to land on a small pad like a hospital helicopter pad. So I remember us landing on the pad and hovering there essentially with one wheel on it while they were getting the patients on and off this helicopter, doing phenomenal things, teammates just doing phenomenal things to help save their fellow man. So that was a great mentoring time for me. Then Hurricane Andrew really forced the unit up to Patrick Air Force Base, so I went up to Cocoa Beach, Florida. I was a traditional reservist at the time, meaning that I didn't have a full-time job. My wife keeps reminding me I didn't have a full-time job. And so we get to Patrick Air Force Base, and I'm living over in Orlando, and I can remember getting my wife her first ID card. And so we go over to Patrick Air Force Base, and I don't have a job except for the reserve job that I'm in. And the young airman says, now ma'am, you need to sign right here where it says dependent. And my wife, in her very quiet, shy self, looks up and says, who's dependent on who here? So who is the dependent? So anyway, we signed the paperwork, and I get on as a full-time Air Reserve technician shortly thereafter. Because we took over the Space Shuttle Rescue mission for the active component who moved to Moody Air Force Base. They were not very happy with us at the time, because the active guys are now having to move to Moody. They were used to living in Cocoa Beach, Florida. So I got on full-time at that time. And an Air Reserve technician is a civil service employee, just like a whole lot of our teammates right here at Robbins, that has a military position attached to it. It's tied to it. That's called an Air Reserve technician. So I'll have eventually 2 retirements, essentially, a military reserve retirement and a civil service retirement as an Air Reserve technician. So I did that till 1999, and then I got a lobotomy and left there and went to the Pentagon, right? So people are saying, you left Cocoa Beach on purpose? And I did, because leadership opportunities were there for me. And once again, I was being coached and mentored by one of my group commander at the time, saw this advertisement and said, Jay, I think this would be right for you. It was a programming job up in the Pentagon working for the Air Force Reserve, but now I had to leave that Air Reserve Technician program and go to the Active Guard and Reserve program, so switching statuses, in order to get a staff tour. I did 3 years there on the staff and went through another pretty traumatic experience. It was called 9/11. I'll never forget, I was in the basement of the Pentagon where they have a medical clinic, and I was getting my tooth filled. A Navy captain was working on me, and the technician comes in and says, sir, something just happened. An airplane has just hit one of the towers in New York City. And he said, well, we're finishing up here. Let's just finish up. By the time I got to the lobby was packed full of folks. And they were looking at the TV, and about that time, the second one hit the second building. And we knew that something was definitely up. So I ran up to my office. I was on the 5th floor on the opposite side of the building where the aircraft actually hit. And I remember getting to my office, and everybody was around the conference table chatting about it. And one of my active duty friends, that we were a very close team of active guard and reserve there in my office, said, you know, that could just as easily have happened here. And within about 2 seconds, it happened here, right? And this is another lesson I've taught my folks here, is that you cannot wait until an incident happens to plan for what you're going to do. 2 weeks prior, we had just run through the drill of how are we going to get out of the building? Where are we going to meet up in the parking lot? What are we going to say? Who are we going to call? How are we going to account for our teammates? That type of thing. So another lesson learned there. But I also learned to appreciate things and remember the experience, that feeling you felt. All of us in this room felt that day, except for some of these young waitresses and waiters that might not have been born back then. But we need to continuously remind ourselves of that feeling that we had that day of disgust, anger, patriotism, helping, right? All those things. And so my reminder is a yellow sticky. You might think, oh, that's kind of odd, a yellow sticky. Well, what happened was, as I got to, we got released, we counted heads, everybody's released to go find your way home. I get to the metro station, and unbeknownst to me, it was free. But this lady saw me in uniform and said, sir, you're in the military, I work in the Pentagon, can I borrow $5 just to get on the metro? I said, ma'am, here's $5, please just take it and go. But she insisted to get my phone number, insisted on it. And so I find out that it's now free when I'm going home, and about 2.5 hours later, I'm unable to call your folks, my wife, to let them know that everything's okay because the phones are jammed. About 2.5 hours later, I get home. A couple of weeks later, we get back in the office after everything's cleaned out, because the soot that went through the system absolutely destroyed a lot of things other than what happened where the actual aircraft hit. But there was a yellow sticky on my desk when I came in with $5. And it said, sir, I'm sorry I haven't been able to get this back to you, but I've been attending funerals of my friends. So that really reminds me and reminds us all of why we got to remember these things, why we need to remember December 7th, 1941, right? We've got to remember these events so we never forget. We've got to teach our kids that. So another life lesson. From there, I got lucky. Somehow I got selected to go to the National War College. And so there's one reservist that gets to go to National War College, and man, it was me. I was so lucky. I get there, and it's just across the street, so I got to change carpool buddies as I'm going in. And these and I was carpooling with a couple of Army guys, a Marine, and they really liked to work out. Air Force guys, we didn't at the time really have to work out as much, so I got to learn, another learning lesson. But after War College, which was absolutely fantastic experience, but as I was sitting there throughout the first semester, admiring my teammates and how well read my classmates were from all the different services and different agencies, and just phenomenal. And as I took my first oral exam in December of that year, I have a professor who was a Navy captain and a civilian that had been working in the Senate for quite some time as a staffer. And the captain says to me, Lieutenant Colonel Flournoy, is there anything that surprised you about the course, that shocks you about what we've taught you? And I thought to myself, I'm really surprised at how well read all my teammates are. It's really made me realize that I've been watching too much ESPN over the last few years and should have been reading a lot more because they had been. So that was a lesson in realizing that I need to catch up. I need to take my profession very seriously. I was a good student, but I wasn't a distinguished graduate. But it really taught me a lesson in taking time to read and to understand and to learn and to be understanding of others and what they think. Don't just watch CNN or Fox News or pick your channel. You know, be a little bit more understanding of other people's thoughts. So that was a lesson. So then from there, I got a call from the boss, the chief of the Air Force Reserve that many of you might have met before, General Sherrod. He was the chief and the first 3-star general for the Air Force Reserve. He calls and says, Jay, I want you to go up to Milwaukee and lead the ops group up there. And I was a combat Air Forces guy, B-52, H-860s. And I said, sir, don't they have C-130s in Milwaukee? He said, listen, knucklehead, I'm not paying you to fly the thing. I'm paying you to lead airmen, right? Lead airmen. And so that's what I did. So I went up there, got to Milwaukee. Great place. Fantastic place. The people are absolutely wonderful. As a matter of fact, I was asking my secretary, Shelley, one day, I said, Shelley, what are you doing this weekend? She said, oh, we're going up north and do a little snowmobiling, you know. And I said, I'm from Mobile, Alabama. How much further north can we go? I mean, this is crazy. But just the most wonderful people. There I went through the BRAC. So I also went through a very trying time of a unit that we had no idea was going to close. I would have bet a paycheck that that unit in the Midwest in a big city was just not going to come down because of the job market that was there. We were able to recruit a lot of great reservists. Here's how I found out. To be ready to be in charge, right? So if you're number 2, you better be ready to be number 1. And that's what happened. I was the ops group commander, so essentially the number 2 on the base. My wing commander was at his son's basic training graduation, which is exactly where he should be, taking care of his family. I was on my way in, and on the radio I hear the governor has announced that the 440th Airlift Wing will be moving from Milwaukee to Pope Air Force Base in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I wanted so badly to turn around and go crawl into my happy space, get under my covers, right? But we've been trained to step out. You're in charge, when in charge, be in charge, right? So went to the base, knowing there was going to be an onslaught of media. The folks on the base, the members of that unit, had grandparents in that unit. Their parents had served in that unit, cousins, uncles, you know. So trying to explain that. So just understanding how to now deal with people and be sensitive to, hey, this is personal for these people. I'm transient. I'm going to be there a couple of years and then I'll be gone. But understanding that real lives have been impacted here. So from there I went to Atlanta, Georgia, to Marietta at Dobbins Air Reserve Base as what we call the A3. That's the Director of Operations for 22nd Air Force. The C-130s, absolutely loved it there. Had a great time. Was only there 2 years when I got called to go to Scott Air Force Base as the wing commander at the 932nd Airlift Wing. And that's a wing, you've seen the blue and white jets that our congressional members fly on and the president flies on, those beautiful blue and white jets. Well, that's what we fly in the Air Force Reserve out of Scott Air Force Base. We have 4 of them. They're called C-40s. And that's where we can fly the First Lady and the congressional members around. So great opportunity there also to meet and understand the importance of our congressional members in a personal way. So we would get on the airplane to go anywhere in the world with these congressional teammates. And that was really the only time that I saw them relax and let their hair down a little bit and not be pressured by somebody sticking a microphone in their face or asking for a comment on their political view or whatever it was. You had to really connect with these members that are, imagine, some of them that don't live in the DC area are flying every weekend back to their district to do what? Campaign for their next election, not spending that quality time with their family. So incredible sacrifices that I don't think they get nearly enough credit for. And so it was a great opportunity to learn from them as well. From there, I went to be the wing commander at Travis Air Force Base out in California, where I was introduced to the host wing commander, now Lieutenant General Jim Betry. And Jim encouraged me to live on base. And as a reservist, we didn't get to live on base in the past. But now we do. Now we do. And so that was a great lesson as well in teamwork. We were going to work as a team. One team, no scene. And like I tell Brian and General Kabenek and the rest of the team, the chief, and everyone, is that we're all in this together. we don't fight by components. We're one team, no seam. We have got to work together, live together, fight together, and take care of one another. So that was another lesson there at good old Travis Air Force Base. From there, I was selected to be a really strange opportunity to be the Air Reserve Personnel Center commander. So you don't see it here, but I got my little personnel badge down here. But I was only there a whole 6 months. I moved there in January of 13, bought a house in April of 13. My wife and kids joined me there from Travis so they get out of school in June of 13, and in July, I got orders. Another lesson. Include your spouse on all decisions, right? So, because literally my wife's hanging that last picture going, we're doing what? But it was a great opportunity. It was a fantastic opportunity to understand the retirement system, the way, how do we promote people, how do all the personnel things that we do in the Air Force Reserve and along with our Guard teammates and our active teammates there at ARPC. Great opportunity to learn all those ropes. Then I got to go be the 4th Air Force Commander down at March, so back to California where it was really expensive. And I'm really glad I'm a procrastinator because I hadn't changed my tags yet from California, so I didn't have to pay for new tags. It was fantastic. Got to stay there for 3 years as the 4th Air Force Commander, which the 4th Air Force Commander is the largest numbered Air Force we have in the Air Force Reserve. It's about 30,000 teammates out there and do all the airlift and air refueling units that we have across the United States. And then I had a unit in Hawaii and in Guam. And so that was a fantastic 3 years. And then off back to Scott for my 5th time, 3 times as a kid and 2 times as an adult, and it was great. Until my wife ran into my 6th grade sweetheart at the commissary, you know. Jay, I ran into Karen at the commissary. She says hi and thanks for the bracelet back in 6th grade. But that was working in the joint environment. And I wish, and I would tell all the newcomers, these new majors or master sergeants, tech sergeants that were coming to work in the joint environment, working with the other services early on in their career, that I'm really glad they're there earlier in their career. Because as a 2-star general, getting your first joint, real in-depth joint opportunity is not the time you want to be getting that experience. So it took a little time. I'm a slow learner anyway, so it took a little time to catch up. First worked for a 4-star Air Force general officer, and now it's a 4-star Army general officer. It's a little different leadership styles for sure, but it was an awesome experience. And then I was asked to come to Robbins to be the deputy commander, and I tell you, I was thrilled to be able to come back to y'all country and speak a little y'all, and we're really where I've been made to feel at home. And many of you know I don't live here in town except for Monday through Thursday. I live up in Peachtree City because my son, this is my 13-year-old's 8th house. And I didn't want to put him through another move through high school because I knew that this was going to be my last assignment. So we made that decision, a family decision, to do that. But you guys have been my family, and I cannot thank you enough. I get to work with teammates like you, April, you especially, and the mayors, and just, it's great to work together to make sure that this is a vibrant community. And I had an opportunity to go meet with Brian's security forces, the defenders, the other day, and thank them, and just any opportunity. Of course, they're all like 18 and 19. You look at them and you go, do your parents know where you are? Oh my God, you're so young. And it's scary, but great teammates. But we always I tell the folks at Air Force Reserve Command as we make our rounds, and I try to get out and lead by walking around. And get out from behind that computer that will suck the life out of you if you let it, right? So you got to get out in front of your troops. Take your fitness test in front of your troops, right? Do all those things to set the example for your teammates. But I always tell them, this is a two-way street. You community leaders always are there when we need you. Always. Never fails. So why aren't we helping fill the food pantries? We have jobs. We have pretty regular jobs, right? So why aren't we giving back to the community? And we do in a big way, and I know that we do. I know Brian encourages that. General Kubenick encourages that, and the Guard certainly does. They are definitely tied to the community. So it's up to us. It's a two-way street to make sure that relationship continues to grow and is built over time as we continue to grow this installation for the future. Because a lot of things have changed since I was here in 1st and 2nd grade, and I'm so happy to see that what hasn't changed is the dedication of the people of this community to the men and women that are serving here at Robbins Air Force Base. I really appreciate your time and appreciate you allowing me to come. Just say a little bit about what I've done and what I look forward to doing very soon in the near future. So thanks a lot.